Hello, Garland Nixon here. And I was just had some thoughts. I was having a discussion with a friend of mine about the Trump charges, and I just thought, you know what? I'll go on YouTube and share my thoughts with my friends. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here. And some thoughts on the Trump charges. Let me start here. I'm sure, I can tell the videos that I do that are going to have a million views, and this probably isn't one of them. This probably isn't a video that's going to get a lot of views, but this one's, who cares? I'll do the video. The truth is, if you understand me, you understand that I don't do videos. I don't do anything. I don't do radio. I don't do anything for views. I don't do anything for feedback. I do simply express my thoughts. And if anybody likes it, fine. If anybody doesn't, that's fine. I once had somebody ask me why, what is your product? They talk about my product. You can do this and that to change your product, and you can do this to attract more people, and you can do this, and blah, 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 blah. And I said, you don't understand what's going on here. Basically, if you walk through the woods, there's some birds singing. And if you decide you want to stop and listen and it sounds good, that's fine. If you don't, you can keep walking. The birds are going to keep singing because they're birds. It's what they do. They don't sing for you. You might sit there and say, this sounds great. That bird ain't singing for you. It is the nature of birds to sing. And you could say, well, birds, if you'd sing a little louder, or maybe you're in an A minor, maybe if you would be in a change your chord. No, that ain't what birds do. They simply sing because they're birds. And so if somebody watches this video or any of my videos, great. If not, I'm just going to do what I do because it's what I think. And I share my thoughts. And I think people appreciate a person who genuinely shares their thoughts. And if they don't, oh, well. Anyway, so let's talk about this whole Trump charges thing. And I think it's an important thing to talk about. At least this is what's on my mind. For starters, it's interesting that I have conversations with people. And a lot of people who are, say, a lefty or whatever, and they oppose the charges. They'll have to start off by saying, now, I'm no Trump supporter. Now, I don't like Trump. My views don't align with Trump. But, right, because, and why does that happen? Because they know that the state of mind that America is in, that the West is in, right, that it's not a logical, principled perspective of evaluating our positions, right? You should not have to say in a society, I don't like this person or I do like this person before you evaluate a situation that they're in. But you do. Well, you don't have to, but a lot of people do. Why? Because if you say, I disagree with the Trump charges, automatically now you're a Trump supporter. You like Trump, you're aligned with Trump. And if you say, I agree with the charges, oh, great, you hate Trump. That's great, because our media has supported a type of, I like what Dr. Jim Kavanaugh, the way he puts it, and he says, we're in a crisis of epistemology. Epistemology being, how do we know what we know? When you believe something, what is that based on? When you articulate a belief or a feeling and someone asks you to support that, epistemology, right? You can support it. You have a reason for believing what you believe. You have a principle that you founded on. There's some foundation there when you take a position, right? So we're in a crisis of epistemology pushed by our media and ultimately by the intelligence community and the powers behind the media that has driven the media to where it is, because the position has to be now, if you like this person, you support, you oppose something that's any actions against them. If you don't like the person, then any actions against them you would support. And the power of that kind of misleading misrepresentation of reality is that they can then create the heroes or villains for you. They can now give you your villains, they can give you your heroes. And once they've given you your villains and your heroes, because your positions are based on who you like and who you don't like, rather than your own principles, and rather than the empirical evidence and the data supporting claims for or against these people, it's all set. Number one, we get you to hate Garland. Number two, now that you hate Garland, any accusations we make against Garland, you're going to accept because you hate Garland. And if somebody says, I don't know about those, they got to start off by saying, no, I don't like Garland, but, and then they can go on to, and then the people still won't believe them. They'll say, oh no, you've got to love Garland. You're a Garland lover, you lover of Garland, right? Why? Because the media, the government, the intelligence community has created a crisis of epistemology, has created a scenario where you are told who to like and who not to like. And once they give you your heroes and villains, now they don't have to give you, they don't have to support their assertions and allegations for or against that person. That's already done. It's already done. I think back, a lot of people know my history with the ACLU, right? I was on the board, worked with the ACLU for years. I was on the National Board of Directors for years. And what I liked about the ACLU back then, let me give an example. When I was with the ACLU, one of the things that we did, Rush Limbaugh, right? He was in trouble in Florida for a bunch of stuff, a number of things that he had gotten, like one of his people that worked for him, one of his servants, you might use that word, to go out and buy the whatever drugs or amphetamines that he was hooked on. He got them to buy it, and he got in trouble for that. And one of the things that he got in trouble for was, if you spend $10,000, if you take $10,000 out of the bank or put it in the bank, you have to the bank has to send a letter to the government letting them know that amount of money has changed hands. So what people will do is they'll take out $9,999 so that they don't trigger that. That's against the law. It's against the law to take out just under the amount. That's how they got Dennis Hastert. That's how they caught Dennis Hastert when he was paying the young wrestler boy that he had molested, right? Allegedly molested, right? So that's one of the ways they were going after Rush. But what the ACLU did was wrote an amicus brief. It's a friend of the court brief, right? And what they opposed was the government, the local police department was trying to get Rush Limbaugh's medical records, doctor's records. And the ACLU wrote an amicus brief, a friend of the court brief, opposing it, saying, no, for this reason, this. Why? Because it was principled at that time. The ACLU was principled. It didn't matter that it was Rush Limbaugh. It was, hey, we believe that they shouldn't be able to get your medical records. Boom, they took a principled position. I was down with the ACLU. That was great, man. That was the kind of things. I remember one time, just running off the mouth here, but this is going to make my point. Here in Maryland, in Annapolis, the KKK, Ku Klux Klan, they were having some rally, and then they wanted to, two times. One time they were trying to get a permit for a rally, and the city said no, and the ACLU stepped in and said, you got to give it to them. Next time there was this buy a road program where you could, a sign would be put up on a road. This road is, been supported by the Kiwanis Club. You pay to the government, they put a sign up, and then you can go along that road and clean up trash on the weekends whenever whatever, but you've paid and you got a sign on the road that says Kiwanis Club. The KKK said, we want to do it. The county said, no, we can't. Your views are abhorrent. The ACLU stepped in and said, wait a minute. Regardless of their political views, you got to let them do it because this is constitutional. And people went bananas. I went on TV all over Maryland and Virginia. I was at that time with the ACLU, and I was happy to go on TV. And I said, look, it doesn't matter. I said, what happens if next the NAACP or some Jewish organization or some Sikh organization says they want to do it, and the local government says, we don't like your particular religion. Once you open the door, because it's the KKK, they can do it to other organizations that you may approve of. We're not going to allow that to happen. This is a constitutional issue, right? You see what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is this: it was a matter of principle. That's why I went to the ACLU. When the ACLU, in my opinion, lost their principles during COVID, I resigned in protest and wrote a protest letter and resigned in protest. Said, hey, I oppose these mandates, and the government the ACLU should oppose them, and if the ACLU is actually pushing these mandates, I'm out of here. So I quit, right? And so the bottom line is this. I say all that about the Trump stuff to say any position that I take on the Trump stuff is a position of principles, of the law, of how I view the future, of how I view the dynamics of this case. It has nothing to do with Trump or anybody else. And unfortunately, all that to say, our media, our government has created an environment where people believe that that taking a position on whether a politician is good or bad, right or wrong, guilty or not guilty of a particular charge should be based on whether or not you like the politician. And oftentimes they don't even know that it is. So let's talk about the issue of the Trump charges. So I made this point in the past. There's a contradiction in supporting the Trump charges. Let's go with this first contradiction. The Department of Justice is going after Julian Assange. I know a lot of people that look at that. In fact, I like interview people who are like 100% against the charges against Assange. It's unjust. It's U.S. Lawfare. It's everything terrible. The DOJ is rotten to the core. They're wrong in going after Assange, right? So now, here's what I say. So you've established that you don't trust the Department of Justice to do the right thing, that you don't trust that they're acting for the good of the order. They're acting based on what the law is. In fact, when you look at the Assange case, you would argue they're acting in a manner that's contrary to the Constitution. They're acting in a manner that's contrary to justice. They're trying to thwart the constitutional protections of the First Amendment. That's clear and obvious to a lot of us. So we look at that and we say the DOJ they're crooked. And what they're doing here is for all the wrong reasons, and they're acting on behalf of the security state. Clearly, they're acting on behalf of the security state. So you talk to people, that is obvious, right? And someone says the Trump administration charged Assange. Certainly did. But that's not relevant to what I'm saying. Who was in the Trump administration? Here's what I would say about that. If you've been paying attention to the deep state, if you've been paying attention to the FBI, the CIA, the NSA over the course of the years, there is no Trump administration. There is no Obama administration. There is no Biden administration. This animal does what it does. So much so that if the president, a particular president they don't like, they'll kill him. And we've seen that happen. Or if somebody is going to be the president they don't like, they'll kill him. That they will literally go out and destroy and do everything they can to take a president apart, and they'll kill him. And so the idea that it was the Trump administration or this administration does not acknowledge the reality that the deep state doesn't work for the president, ever. Not relevant. They are there as long as the president's doing what they want him to do. And that goes for Biden too. If Biden goes in a direction the deep state don't want, they'll take him out however they need to. That's a fact. So the Trump administration is irrelevant to this argument. But I continue. So Assange, a lot of people will like, yeah, that's wrong. That's terrible. Oh, the DOJ is wrong. They're rotten to the core. They're acting on behalf of the deep state. Okay. Isn't there a contradiction to believe that the deep state, in the case of Julian Assange, and we could go on a whistleblower after whistleblower, Jeffrey Sterling, on and on and on, right? We could go and ask you, do you think that Assange is going to get a fair trial? Of course he ain't going to get a fair trial. Get out of here. A fair trial, they'd have to throw it out immediately. They'd have to throw this case out, right? His case out for innumerable reasons that we won't go over right now. But now you establish something that you don't trust the deep state. They're up to no good. And what they're doing, the DOJ is doing in the case of Assange, Jeffrey Sterling, et cetera, is on behalf of the deep state. Fair enough. Great. But if you're going to support the Trump charges, what you have to believe is that contradiction. You have to stumble through that contradiction, wherein on one side, I will argue that the deep state is acting, that the Department of Justice is acting in a corrupt manner, which clearly they are when it comes to Julian Assange, that they're acting on behalf of the deep state, that they're acting in a way that's contrary to the First Amendment, to the Constitution, right? So you establish that all this stuff, then you can go on and on and on. about all the stuff that they're doing wrong and illegal and unjust when it comes to Julian Assange. But then you have to circle back and say, but when it comes to Trump, they're acting on for the good of the order. That a Department of Justice that could be so corrupt, that could be nothing but the leading edge of injustice for the deep state, the CIA, etc. That this group, but when it comes to Trump, they're doing the right thing. That somehow the Department of Justice, in one instance, could be terribly corrupt, could act in total and absolute violation of the First Amendment of the Constitution, could act in a way that will destroy the First Amendment. That if this happens, if they're able to get their way with Assange, the First Amendment, when it comes to freedom of press, is worth a crap. You can wipe your butt on it for toilet paper when the DOJ gets finished with it, if they're able to get their way when it comes to Assange. But when it comes to Trump, now you're saying, I trust them to do the right thing. Well, they're going to, they certainly acted in a manner that was legal and just. When it comes to Trump, they're going after Trump because he did wrong, which means that they want to bring Donald Trump to justice. You have to believe that contradiction. You can if you want to, but it's a contradiction that I can't get over. And all the I hate Trump statements in the world, Trump is evil, Trump is this, Trump is that, is not going to mitigate that obvious contradiction. Now, let's add this. The Department of Justice, when it comes to Donald Trump, sees him in the way that they see everybody else. That they evaluate Donald Trump and his actions on the same scale of justice that they do with everyone else, right? That he's just, because there's two things when it comes to justice. Let me give you, there's a couple, not more than two, but there's one. And this is a constitutional issue, but it's also a moral and ethical issue. When I was with the ACLU, one of the things that we did, I believe it was Howard County in the state of Maryland. This is before weed was legal, right? And there was an investigation and there were numbers. And what we found was that Howard County was like 9% Black, like 91%. And I may have the numbers wrong, but it was close. 91% of the people in Howard County were white and like 9% were Black. When you looked into weed, roughly the same percentage of whites and Blacks smoked weed, right? Roughly, let's say, I'm just going to throw out a number. 100,000 of them, just for the purpose of this argument. 100,000 white people, 100,000 Black folks in this county smoked weed. When you looked at the numbers, 94% of the people that got arrested were Black. And we're like, something's wrong with this picture. Basically, and I grew up and I saw this, and I grew up in an area that was mostly white. I had a lot of white, hung out with my buddies. It was mostly a lot of white friends, right? Mixed white and Black were in the area where I grew up. And what you come to realize was that the poor Black guy, if he got caught with the weed, the white guy, throw this away and go, especially back then, right? Go home to your dad and going about your business. The Black guy gets arrested. So what you had, I'm all this to make a point about Trump. What you had was, again, a constitutionally, it was constitutionally illegal. One of the constitutional principles is equal justice under the law. And if you got two groups of people, and both of them get caught with the same crime, and one of them gets let go and one of them gets arrested, that's not equal protection under the law, right? So let's take this back to the Trump thing. The other principle that I look at here is Trump deserves equal protection under the law. He deserves to be treated the same as any other politician and any other American. So, and let me explain what I meant, because people would make this argument. Well, sure, the more Black folks got arrested, but they had weed. They did, in fact, had weed. And I'd say the argument was not whether or not they violated the law. It was an equal protection under the law. The issue is you got two people that have weed. One of them gets arrested. One of them doesn't. That's unconstitutional. It's not equal protection under the law. Let's take that to Trump. Equal protection under the law, and go here. The FBI during the 2020 election cycle and you probably heard me talk about this before, but this is important. They, during the 2020 election cycle, they had gone to Delaware and gotten a laptop. The guy called him, and he was a laptop repairman, and said, "Hey, man, I got Hunter Biden's laptop, and he won't come get it, and it might have anything secrets on it. You guys need to come get it." The FBI didn't respond the first time. He called them a second time. They came and got the laptop. They knew what was on it. They knew that there was incriminating evidence against Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. They in June, they had a confidential human source. You can look up the FBI 1023 if you want to, with Chuck Grassley, and read it yourself. The guy comes to them and he spills the beans on Biden, and he says, "Yeah, we got audio tape of Biden and Hunter doing dirt, all talking." He says we were bribed, but we were basically forced. We didn't want to hire Hunter, but Joe and Hunter both forced us to do it, and we paid him $5 million each, and on and on and on, bribery, you name it. So a guy comes forward 6 months, well, June, July, August, September, October, November, 6 months before the election, and says, 5 months really, "Hey, I got the goods on Biden. He's rotten to the core. And here's what all he did. Oh, by the way, we got audio tapes." And the DOJ took that information in, the FBI, and they didn't act on it. So they had a confidential human source from the company of Burisma who said Biden and these people are rotten to the core, and we got evidence. They had a laptop, and that we've since found out that that laptop corroborated the evidence. There was corroborated those claims. There was emails, et cetera, in there that corroborated the Burisma claims. So the FBI had everything they needed to go after Joe Biden and his son, to further the investigation, to look into it, et cetera. Everything they needed to look into corruption against Joe Biden. And what did they do? Did they look into corruption against Joe Biden? Did they say, we want to find out what happened and we got to look into that because Biden's up to no good? No, they didn't. What they did is, with the overwhelming evidence, they had a mountain of evidence against Joe Biden. They contacted the social media companies, and they said to the social media companies, look, if somebody comes to you and says that there's a laptop out there, or Hunter Biden laptop, and there's lots of dirt on Joe Biden, it's Russian disinformation, and you need to censor it, and we'd be happy to help you censor it. They then had a call from Tony Blinken to the CIA, and who was involved in Joe Biden's campaign at the time, and a call from Tony Blinken to some FBI people, and they worked together to put together a letter that said 51 former intelligence officials say that the Hunter laptop Biden story has all of the earmarks of Russian disinformation. Here's my point. The FBI worked with the Biden administration and the intelligence community to suppress a story, and they had the evidence that it was valid. You see where I'm going? Equal protection under the law. John Durham. The Durham investigation, which to some extent was a sham, a cover-up and a sham, I'll be honest, I said that from the very beginning. But one of the things that they found, and they had no choice, they had to find this. One of the things that the Durham investigation found in writing was that the FBI, when going after Trump, basically started an investigation against Donald Trump with no legitimate predicate. That's their word. They had no reason to start the investigation against Trump. They had no legal reason to start an investigation against Trump, and they started an investigation against Trump with nothing except hatred for Trump. And might I add, there were those involved in leading the investigation, Peter Strzok, who were sending texts that said, Donald Trump's not going to be president. We will stop him. We have an insurance policy. Mueller, who was supposedly, ostensibly leading the investigation into Trump, which he wasn't really, found that Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, two people at the head of the investigation, were texting each other back and forth, and they had either 20 or 40,000 texts. Rather than look into them, he erased the text. He destroyed evidence. Think about that. He's doing an investigation, and there's ample evidence in that investigation that needs to be looked into. He erased them. He should be charged for that as a criminal act, right? Destruction of evidence. Bottom line is this. So we find out that the Trump investigation was a sham, a scam, and it was a witch hunt, exactly as Donald Trump said. So that being said, we're supposed to believe that the same Department of Justice that led a scam, sham, witch hunt that is now actually it is documented, clearly documented, that the Department of Justice started an investigation against Donald Trump with no legitimate predicate, which means they had an illegitimate predicate. But Durham doesn't talk about that because I think we know what it was. And it would literally bring our government down if the truth were outed or even discussed here. So now the DOJ has been investigating Donald Trump for I don't know how long with no legitimate predicate. And now we're supposed to believe, oh, well, might I add, look up another guy named Kevin Kleinsmith. What we find out is in the course of that investigation, they violated the law, massive legal violations. They deliberately, with malice and aforethought, committed perjury to the courts. They put things in a request for warrant multiple times that they knew were false. And submitted it to the FISA court multiple times, signed off all the way up the investigation. Nobody was held accountable. Nobody was charged. That is a violation of the law. I used to do that stuff. I was a police officer. I was a commander of the investigations division. Let me tell you, if I signed off on some warrant, I looked into something and I knew it was false and they found out, they'd have locked my ass up. So I knew better. I wouldn't do it. And I was just in a police department here in the state of Maryland. I knew good and damn well that if I deliberately lied to the court, I was instrumental in firing a police officer. I think he should have been fired. They didn't fire him. They allowed him to resign, which I think was a mistake. But it is what it was. But who lied in court? He said he was somewhere and he wasn't there, and the court figured out he was off that day, and he ended up losing his job behind it. Right? You can't lie to the court. Unless you're the deep state, then nobody gets charged. Kevin Kleinsmith was charged because basically the CIA sent a memo to the FBI, and that memo said, look, Carter Page was helped us on a prior project. He is not he did help us on a former project. He's an okay guy. And Kleinsmith changed it to he did not help us, and he changed the wording in an email that they'd gotten from the CIA and submitted it to the court. He lied. And you know what he got? He didn't even get disbarred. Basically, he got 1 year probation. He didn't even get a slap on the wrist. He got nothing. He got let go for lying to the court deliberately, intentionally. That's a felony. That's 10 years. They got nothing. Perjury. So bottom line is this. We see an investigation that was rotten from beginning to end. We see an investigation where crimes were literally committed by the Department of Justice to go after Donald Trump. We see an investigation against Julian Assange where the U.S. government admits that they plotted to kidnap and murder him. That they bugged his attorneys. They violated attorney-client privilege. They violated every rule and every law that they could possibly do against Julian Assange. In a years-long investigation against Donald Trump, they committed felonies, and they started the investigation with no legitimate predicate. And now I'm supposed to suspend all of that knowledge and believe that this time they're going after Trump for the right reasons. And that this time that they have a legitimate predicate for their investigation and that their investigation is sound. I find that impossible to believe. Unless you just hate Donald Trump and you're certainly happy that you've been, here's what I see. The same people who have been looking at this thing for the last 7-8 years, damn near, every time they say the walls are closing in, they got Trump this time, they stand up and they do a standing ovation. Yes, they got him this time. And then when that falls through, they go, oh, darn. And then 6 months later, yeah, we're going after Trump for mopery on the high seas. Woo! And they're high-fiving and they're dancing. They got that sumbitch this time. Yay! And then that falls through. Oh. And they go through this emotional roller coaster every time these corrupt, lying criminals at the Department of Justice say, we got Trump this time. They jump up and shout. Every time for 4 years. Oh, they're going to get Trump for something with Russia. Yeah, he's involved with something with Russia. It didn't matter what it was. All it mattered was they hated Trump. Any assertions and allegations against Trump were to be accepted, were to be celebrated, were to be supported. And anybody who said, I don't believe him, must be attacked. Why? Because this had nothing to do with whether or not they believed the charges or the substance of the charges. I talked to somebody recently and I was like, do you think these, and I knew it was a setup. I got to be honest. It was a setup. I do that sometimes. And I said, what do you think about, Trump, he's bad, he's this, he's that, on and on. And, they went to Russia. Yeah, Russia, this and that. Oh, a bunch of crap. And I said, do you think Trump's guilty of what the things that he's been charged with? Oh, yeah, he's surely, absolutely, Trump's guilty. No question about it. That son of a bitch is dirty. He's rotten to the core. They finally got him and he's going down. Do you think he's going to be found guilty? Well, he will have to be found guilty because he did it. I said, okay, do me a favor. I am not as familiar, obviously, with the charges as you are, which I was lying. I love to do this. This is an old trick, my friends. It's an old trick. Feign ignorance. Have you ever heard the term, the saying, if you're in court, a lawyer's never going to ask a question that he doesn't have the answer to already. So beware when he asks you a question, because he knows the answer and he's about to set a trap for your ass, right? So same principle. What I said was, I'm like, oh, really? Well, look, I don't know that much. So you say he's guilty. Yeah, he's definitely surely guilty. You're sure of that? I don't know that much about the charge. You see where I'm going? The setup. The trap was sprung. The cheese in that trap was, you hate Donald Trump. That was the cheese. So when I said, is he guilty? I know you're going to say, oh my God, guilty. That son of a, he's saying blah, blah. Okay. I see that coming. So now that the cheese is there and you take a bite at the cheese, let's snap the trap on your friggin' toes. So I said, look, I don't know that much about the case, if I'm not really going to say he's guilty or not guilty until I find out furthermore about the case. And so I've been looking for somebody that knew a lot about the case. I'm glad, you have said he's guilty and he's guilty. So I need you to do me a favor. What is he charged with? What's this RICO stuff? How's that work? I used to teach RICO, right? We're going to talk criminal justice. What's this RICO stuff? What's it stand for? RICO. What does it even stand for? How's that work? What is Trump charged with? Tell me why you think he's guilty. And they looked at me with this look. It's the look that says the mousetrap just went on my toes. And man, this don't feel good. And they were like, well, I think it's something to do with January 6th he's charged with. And they just kind of fumbled for a second. And I said, wait a minute. You told me you thought he was guilty. But you don't know what the charges are. You don't know what the charge is. You think he's guilty of something, but you don't know what the charges are. And they're, well, Trump, he's done all kinds of stuff, like with the Russians. I said, wait a minute. If they charge me with doing 65 mile an hour in a 55 mile an hour zone, don't they got to prove that I was speeding? Can an officer go to court and the judge says, why should we convict him? Well, he's done a lot of things in the past. When he was young, he used to squeal wheels. Was he convicted of that? No. When he was young, he used to smoke weed every day. He was a heroin addict. He used to rob stores. He was a rapist, a murderer, a larcenist. He cut people's arms off. He was guilty of mayhem. Every crime we can think of. The felonies are Mr. and Mrs. Tam or Mr. and Mrs. Lamb, right? Murder, rape, sodomy, theft, arson, mayhem, burglary, right? Mr. and Mrs. Tam. But bottom line is this. The judge is going to say he may have done all of that stuff, dude, but you charged him with speeding. I need you to prove that he sped, that this ticket says 65 in a 55 zone. You got to prove that. You can't tell me what he did in the past. In fact, that stuff is not even admissible. So I don't want to hear it. So I was like, well, wait a minute. So what you're telling me is you don't know the charges, but you think he should be found guilty. Not based on these charges, but because he did things in the past. Was he convicted of any of those? No, I don't think so. So there was allegations against him in the past that he was never convicted of. There's an allegation of him today, but you don't know what it is. But you think he's guilty of whatever this charge is that you don't know what it is. Well, I'm not going to tell you how that conversation ended. I'm just going to say, don't you think you could have that conversation with a whole lot of people? That you could say to them, do you think Trump is guilty? And they would say yes. And you could say, what are the charges? And they wouldn't have a damn idea what the charges are. I would say that the the majority of the people out here who say Trump's guilty is going to be in the same position. That's why I had to feign ignorance. The setup was, hey, you think he's guilty? I knew. And I was even like, yeah, Trump, that stinking Trump. What a jerk. Yeah, he's a jerk. Oh, man, what did the kids stand Trump? Oh, yeah. That's the setup. And then the next move is, you think he's, well, of course he's that bastard. Of course. And then the next setup is, I don't know that much about the case. I need somebody to explain it to me. Tell me the charges. Boom, trap is sprung. But why does that work? Because that's where we are in the United States. If you hate somebody, I'll put it like this. Hey, what do you think about Putin? He's an evil dictator. Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, my God, Putin's a dictator. There's not a dictator, more of a dictatorial dictator in the world than Putin. Oh, really? Yeah. Tell me a little bit about him. Huh? Okay. I don't know that much about Putin. I can't say he's a dictator. I can't say he's not a dictator. I don't know. Of course, I know. But tell me a little bit about his, actions that were really bad. They look stupid. Why is this? Because they don't even have a superficial grasp of the issues that they're talking about, because their positions are not based on data. They're not based on empirical evidence. They are based on emotions. We teach you to hate someone. And then once you hate them, we now teach you must join us to support the persecution and or prosecution of those you hate. Once we teach you to hate somebody, we'll give you some words to go with them. Dictator, evil, whatever words we go, racist, sexist, whatever. I'm not saying that any of those things are true, false, or indifferent. I'm just saying they hand you all of this stuff related to a particular person. And then when the deep state does their dirt and goes after that person, because you know nothing about the charges, because you don't take any context about justice, the context is, I don't like this person. This person is evil. And therefore, right, the means justify the end. Because this person is evil, any action I take against them is justified. See, that's the foundation of this. When someone says, when I ask, hey, what about Trump? This case here, you charge a guy when obviously, there's a lot of issues with this. Yeah, but, and because this is what they're really saying, even though these charges are dubious, spurious, whatever you want to use, right? Even though I don't know that much about these charges, to be honest, I think it should be found guilty because he's done lots of things in the past, but he wasn't convicted. When I bring up, but he hasn't been convicted of any of those allegations either. Right? It leaves them stunned. It leaves them stumped because nobody asked those questions. He hasn't been convicted of that stuff. They made 1 million allegations against him. See, that's one of the games. You come in every day. Well, Garland Nixon didn't refill the coffee pot. You come in the next day. Garland Nixon walked across the carpet with his muddy shoes. You come in the next day. Garland Nixon shook his umbrella all over the place and got the whole office wet. So you come in every day and you make an allegation against Garland. And then eventually we got to fire Garland. Why? Because he's got so many complaints against him. But he hasn't been convicted of any of the complaints. Did Garland Nixon walk in and shake his umbrella all over the place? Well, actually, it wasn't even raining that day. Did Garland Nixon not refill the coffee maker? Actually, Garland Nixon brought in a big thing of Dunkin' Donuts and a big thick jug of free coffee for everybody. So the coffee machine wasn't working that day. Garland spent his own money to bring coffee and donuts for the entire office. Oh, okay. And you come to find out that every allegation against Garland Nixon was false. But you make lots of them. And then when you get to the end, you say, there's been so many allegations against Donald Trump. He's got to be guilty. And the idea was to build the allegations until you could have a false mountain of allegations, and then you could pretend as though every one of them was valid. Well, how do we know they're valid? Well, there's been so many allegations, so many claims against this guy. How can his hands be clean? You made all of them. You made 100 claims against Garland Nixon, and then said Garland Nixon's got to be dirty. Why? Because he's got 100 claims against him. That's what we see with Donald Trump. They made claim after claim against Trump. And then they said he's got to be dirty. Why? Because he's got so many claims against him. But you made all the damn claims. The people who hate him made claim after claim. And we find out through the Durham investigation, which we already know, that the Department of Justice started an investigation against this man. And they had they had no legal predicate to do it. They literally violated the law in trying to get him. The whole investigation fell apart, got thrown out of court. And then now those same people are coming after Donald Trump with a new claims, everything in the world that they can against Donald Trump. And I'm supposed to think that they're doing it for the right reasons. Their investigation against Donald Trump was corrupt and illegal and violated the law and violated the Constitution. Their investigation is Donald Trump, against Julian Assange, corrupt, illegal, violated the Constitution. But this one, I'm supposed to believe the DOJ has turned over a new leaf. And I'm also supposed to believe that this corrupt group, this corrupt organization, they're going after the Uhuru movement, the African People's Socialist Party. This is a group that have done for 50 years. They've done the same thing. They're exercising their constitutional right. They're socialists. They have a constitutional right to exercise whatever political ideology they choose. They are in these poor Black neighborhoods. They have things where I know this one thing they do where they have this kind of kitchen thing. And when people get out of prison, they give them a job working in this restaurant kitchen thing, and they teach them culinary skills so they can go get a job. There's one poor Black neighborhood where they raised $125,000. They didn't have any really recreation or anything. They raised $125,000. They built a basketball court. It said a Uhuru movement or whatever on the court. Okay. That's the kind of stuff they're doing. They got a right to do that. They ran a candidate who got 1.7% of the vote. Anybody, I can run if I want to. You can run under any party you want to. The Communist Party, the Socialist Party, the Nazi Party, whatever party, it's legal. As long as you're not injuring or hurting or doing something illegal, you got a right to run. So what happens? The Department of Justice goes after them. Oh, this is a Russian disinformation group. They're working for the Russians. They got to go to jail. This group has been doing the same damn thing that they've been doing for the last 50 years. But now all of a sudden, they're Russian whatevers. It is a crime what they're doing to go after the Uhuru movement. They're going after people. Look at the January 16 thing, the January 6th thing. Disagree with 100%. There's FBI agents running all over creation. It's very suspect what was going on there. But even that, you basically got people who, to me, what do you got? Kind of trespassing. Maybe they weren't supposed to be in these places and they wandered through these places. Okay, fine. Were they trying to overthrow the government? I didn't see any arms. I didn't see them put the gun to somebody's head and say, we got to take the government over. They wandered through. A lot of these people, they were dressed like they're in a Buffalo Bills game with face paint and horns on, and they wandered around the Capitol. Okay. You're giving these people 18 and 20, 22 and 30 years in prison? I oppose that. You know why? I am consistent. Even if you make the argument, these people violated the law, whatever law it was. I am consistent. There's people in jail for weed. We got more people in jail in this country than any country in the world when it comes to the percentage of people of our population, right? Man, we put people in jail for nothing. Some guy writes a bad check, they give him 2 or 3 years, right? We got this prison industrial system that makes money putting people in jail. We got too many people in jail. We put people in jail for a bag of weed or something. Get out of here with that. We put people in jail for anything because there's money to be made by putting people in jail. So my point is, I'm for less people in jail, not more. And if you got some guy who was wandering around the Capitol with a friggin' face paint and horns on, and you're unhappy with that, let's say you convict him of something. I may disagree with it, but let's say you convict a guy of wandering through the Capitol and this sedition crap is lies. I don't believe it. But here's my point. 20 years? I don't think these people should go to jail, even if convicted of something. I think you can fine them. You can do community service. I am consistent with my principles. We need less people. I don't say there's too many black people in jail. There's too many Mexican people in jail. There's too many white people in jail. And well, all those things you can argue for, sure. I say there's too many people in jail. And we need to, it happens that the majority of them are going to be people of color. Sure, of course. But my point is this. When I look at the January 6th people ideologically that I disagree with, some of them may be ideologically hostile towards my left leanings, but that's unimportant right now. I'm just talking about principles and justice. As far as I'm concerned, we got too many people in jail. And I'm not going to say January 6th or weed or this or that. I'm going to say we have too many people in jail in this society. And we need to find ways our criminal justice system needs to find ways to deal with whatever crime someone's convicted of without locking people up in jail and paying $80,000 a year per prisoner. Maybe, perhaps that's one of the reasons that so many people are in jail. So my thing is, if I were president tomorrow, I would pardon these people. I'd let them out of jail. If they had been served of time, I'd let them go with time served. I'd let them all walk. Does it have to do? You can argue about the January 6th stuff. You can argue about what it is or what it wasn't or blah, blah, blah. But I ain't putting people who wandered around the Capitol when I watched the police move the barricades and open the door and allow them to walk in. That's what happened. It's inarguable. They moved the barricades. The cops moved the barricades and opened the door. These people wandered in. I'm not putting those people in jail for 15 years. If you choose to say they weren't supposed to be in there and that they knew it and so they're wrong, okay, fine, giving some community service or whatever the hell, fine, whatever. But putting people in jail, I don't believe people should be in jail for that kind of stuff. You kill somebody, you rob somebody, you break in somebody's house, you steal, massive theft, things like that. Okay, sure. But just wandering around the Capitol or a lot of these basic crimes, you got caught with a little bit of weed, a little bit of coke, something like that. No, I'm not putting you in jail for that. We got too many people in jail. That's a principled approach rather than I don't agree with that person. Look, when I saw what happened, when I look at the crowds, look at in January 6th, to me, those are Biden's people in a way. They got these Israel signs all over the place. Israel, 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 right? They're right-wing Israel supporters. They've got they hate communism, anti-communism. They hate China. These are people that are aligned with Joe Biden. If you understand politics, that's Joe Biden. Interestingly enough, from the perspective, the Venezuelan right-wingers who hate Maduro and want to overthrow the government of the people who hate Cuba, all of the people, they're actually ideologically, from a foreign policy perspective, aligned with the Biden administration. But bottom line was not with me. Interestingly enough, as far as I'm concerned, Cuba, Venezuela, or whatever, take all the sanctions off, leave them alone, and let those societies develop as they seem please, and go on about your business. It's their country, leave them alone. I believe in that. Leave them alone, man. Don't be oppressing other countries, going after other countries. None of our damn business. Go on. We need to be fixing to take care of our business. But the Biden administration now is saying all of those people have to go to jail, and they're proud of it. And there are people dancing in the streets. Yay, they got the Trump people. And they put them in jail. I disagree. I time served it all out. And let me tell you something, a whole hell of a lot of other people are in jail that if Carla Nixon was president, you're out. Time served. Get the hell out of here. We ain't paying $80,000 a year to keep you in jail for friggin' bad checks. Not happening. But all that I say this. So my point is this. It's about what? Getting back to Trump. When you talk about charges, criminal activity, people going to jail, who goes to jail, who doesn't go to jail, who gets investigated, who doesn't get investigated. When you talk about that, unfortunately, there is a word that has been left out of the conversation. It's a word that I talk about. It's the word that I believe in. And the word's justice. You see, justice has nothing to do with friends and enemies. Justice does not have to do with ideology. The justice doesn't have to do with whether you like people or not. You can be a far right wing. You know, what's a perfect example? I appreciate guys who ideologically I'm not aligned with, but I appreciate that when the African People's Socialist Party, the Uhuru movement, got charged, Glenn Beck, a guy who ideologically I'm not aligned with, came out and said, I oppose this. This is wrong. You're going after these people for their ideology. Tucker Carlson came out and said, this is wrong. These people stood on principle. And I disagree with these guys on some things, and Glenn Beck, and some I agree with, whatever, but mostly disagree because I'm a lefty. But they came out based on principle and said, look, this is wrong. They don't like socialism. They're opposed to it. They think it's evil, blah. They're, American, yeah, go America, red, white, and blue, blah, blah, blah. Socialism is evil. That's who these guys are, right? I don't agree with that. But that being said, I think it means they should get all the more credit for discarding their ideology on behalf of justice. What they said was, this is not just. And you poor idiots, they're going to use it to come after the Uhuru movement, and your ass is next. Next, they're going, if nothing else, self-preservation. If you let them open that door, kind of like if you're in court, you know what I mean? You may not be able to talk about something, and then the attorneys, the plaintiffs, or whoever, the defendants open a door that you want to go down. And now you can talk about that. You couldn't talk about it until they bring it up. Once they bring it up, boom, you can jump and you can go down that way. And that's what I'm talking about here. All right. So I would argue that the Justice Department is acting in a manner, has a history of acting in a manner. I mean, you can go back to the 50s and 60s. You can go back to, they were literally going after people who were socialists and communists, saying, you got to fire these people. Going to schools, this person's a communist or a socialist, you got to fire them. But that was unconstitutional, because the Constitution is clear. You can be a communist or a socialist if you choose. Constitutionally speaking, that is protected political activity. However, the government that we have does not and has not ever respected the Constitution, and they're not respecting the Constitution now. And I don't trust these people to go after Donald Trump. I don't trust them to go after Donald Duck. I don't trust them to go after anybody. And when I look at the charges against Trump, it is so glaringly obvious. The DOJ pursued an illegal and illicit investigation against this man for the last 7 years. And now they've charged him. And I'm supposed to believe that this investigation is legal and licit. But you know what my point is. I'm supposed to believe that they pursued him in a way that was literally illegal, unethical, and unjust, and that suddenly they woke up and decided to act in a way that was legal and ethical and just. That is illogical to believe that. It's completely, at the same time, they're going after Assange in a manner that's illegal, unethical, unjust, and unconstitutional. They're going against the Uhuru movement right now in a manner that's illegal, unethical, unjust, and unconstitutional. But Trump is the only one that they're doing the right thing on. And I'm supposed to believe that these people who they go after, Glenn Greenwald, Matt Taibbi, they go after, remember we found out that there was an investigation going on, that the DOJ and that the intelligence community was searching emails and things like that from Tucker Carlson. They were going after a media guy who's doing media. Like him, don't like him, agree with him or not, he does media. Some of the stuff he does is great, some of the stuff I disagree with. But the machine, the deep state machine, was going after him for a manner that was illegal, illicit, unjust, and unethical, and unconstitutional. And so we're supposed to believe that the people that did all of this are doing these things to protect us from Donald Trump. See, that's the other part. The ruling elite who basically rob us blind, rape, rob, and murder us and everything that we stand for, who abuse the working class, who leave the working class in indebted servitude, That's their whole game plan. How can they lend us something else? How can they get us in more and deeper debt? College loans, you name it. They want to leave us in debt. They want to leave us working for nothing. And we are supposed to believe that this same group is working to protect us from Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is doing such illegal things. They got to protect us. And if you look even at the facts of the case, to say they're dubious is unbelievable. To look at this and say, at this trial, as I see it, this is how I see it. This is my legal interpretation of this whole thing. Donald Trump did and said things that, if in fact there were illegalities, if in fact he had a sound reason to go after, if in fact there were illegalities and abnormalities in the voting system, that he would have every right to say and do. You got every right. At the end of a election, if you feel that you've been robbed, you got a right to say, I was robbed. If you feel that the other system side was unjust, you got a right to say that. If you believe there was illegalities and abnormalities, you have every right to say that. If you in fact want to bring together some people and say, we're going to fight this thing, you have a right to bring those people together and to plan and scheme. This is what we're going to do next. This is how we're going to. You got a right in Georgia to call the election guy and say, hey man, look, they're saying we lost by 160,000 votes. We won this state. Because what they took out was, Trump said, find the votes because we won this. He said we won this. If I call and I say, look, I won that damn state, and they're saying that I didn't win by 160,000 votes, find them damn votes. Those votes are there. I won that state. You got a right to say, I won the state, the votes are there. And we're alleging that votes were miscast, lied, treated, all this kind of stuff. So you're making allegations that support what you're saying that you believe. We want to put out, I'm not saying it's true or false. That's irrelevant right now. This is an exercise in what rights you have. So what I'm saying is this: if in fact there were illegalities, Donald Trump has every right to go after those illegalities, to try to bring these things to justice, to try to go to court and fight them, to make phone calls, to do everything, to plan and plot as to how they're going to fight this if he truly believes that he was had. And in fact, if let's say it was true, let's say there's the evidence it's true, he has a right to do it. Let's say he believes that it's true. He has a right to try and prove what he believes. So in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of people, the case rests on what Donald Trump believes. Because if Donald Trump truly believed that he had every right to do what he did. He had every right to call and say, hey man, those votes are there, find them. And as he said, because we won. Well, that implies that he's saying, find the votes because I believe they are there. He has every right to do that. Now, if he says, find the votes, and they check and they're like, you need 160,000. We only found 5,000. But he has the right to ask. And they should look to see if they're there. This is if you want to believe, which I don't, that this is a democracy. One of the most critical parts of a democracy is judicial review, right? Judicial review. Even in a court case, you get this term, judicial review. I used to teach this stuff. What is the judicial review? Something happens, you bring it before a judge or a panel of judges. They review it to ensure that it is aligned with constitutional protections, with court precedent, judicial precedent, etc. Right? So you got a right to. This is about Donald Trump, in my opinion, his right to judicial review. At the end of this case, he has a right to go to court and say, I think I was had. A lot of times, I've seen cases in court where, let's say somebody sues someone, and the judge looks at it and he says, you ain't got much of a case here, but there's enough that you can bring it before a jury, right? You got enough. The plaintiffs, the defendant, whatever you want to call them, the defendant says, man, throw this case out, judge, because they got no chance of winning that. And the judge looks at it and says, well, I can see one argument they have. I would throw it out, but there's a possibility that based on that, at least they got a right to get heard before a jury, right? Judicial review. The judge reviewed it to see whether or not. Now, after the case, you win, lose, or draw, you then say, I'm going to submit this to an appellate court. So oftentimes it is a panel of judges that judicial review. They look at it and they say, evaluate it and say you're right or wrong or whatever. We're going to pass on this. We're going to send it back down to the court for this particular point right here. It's got to go back down to the court to decide that. We've made a decision. Maybe you can take it up to the Supreme Court. Maybe you can take it to a higher court. Judicial review. It's part of a democratic process, right? So Donald Trump had every right to judicial review. And what they're basically saying is he didn't have a right to judicial review. And his attempt to get judicial review was a crime because, and this is what it is, because remember, you got it right. You run for office, you lose, you have a right to judicial review. You have a right to go to the court. In fact, in a lot of states, if you have a race decided by under a certain number, for instance, you got states and municipalities where if a person loses by less than 1%, different numbers, let's say 1%. If somebody wins or loses by less than 1%, there are municipalities where it triggers an automatic review, where it triggers a recount, where they have decided in that state, look, if it's only 1%, we're going to make sure we automatically do a recount. We want people to, that's too close. We want people to have confidence in the system. Not unreasonable, right? So bottom line is, as I see it, Donald Trump was asking for judicial review. He was claiming that he's got a right. You got a right to believe that, even if it ain't true or if it is, you got a right to believe that, and you got a right to judicial review and to demand and ask for judicial review. So, to me, to say you've got to argue that Donald Trump didn't believe that he really was robbed, that there was inconsistencies or illegalities, or that he really believed that the system was constitutionally sound, and knowing that, he tried to overthrow it. He tried to get the election thrown out anyway. That he really knew that. If you've been paying attention to Donald Trump, it was his NBC interview the other day, and what did he do? He argued that he was robbed. It's clear to me that Donald Trump believes he was robbed. Whether you believe it or not is irrelevant. But it's clear to me that Donald Trump believed that he was robbed. If that is the case, if you believe that there's something wrong with the election, you have a right to demand judicial review, and you have a right to bring your people together. And even if your lawyers say, I don't think you got much of a case here, if you believe it, you still got a right to do it. You can go hire other lawyers. You can file it yourself. So what they're saying is Donald Trump's attempt to get judicial review was illegal and corrupt. And he should go to jail for trying to get judicial review because he knew that what he was doing was wrong and he knew that he lost. Well, first of all, let me add, second of all, you've got to convince me, if I'm sitting on a jury, that Donald Trump, of his state of mind, that despite the fact that he said that he believed that he was robbed over and over, and he to this day stands on that and says, I think I was robbed. I think it was illegal. I think it was wrong. I think the election was stolen. So you got to convince me that a man who from the very beginning argued that the election was stolen up to today argues the election was stolen. You've got to convince me that he didn't think the election was stolen. I don't see how that's absurd to me. That's why it's absurd to me to charge him. This is not about whether Donald Trump is good or bad. This is not about whether he's right or wrong. This is about this. If he truly believed that the election was illegal, that the election was unsound, he had a right to seek judicial review. Now, here's what they say. Well, his cases were thrown out. Isn't that part of judicial review? In fact, some of his cases were thrown out because they weren't heard. Some of his cases, and Trump can make this argument, look, we said to several courts, we want to submit evidence. And the court looked at it and said, we're not going to allow you to submit evidence. We're not going to listen to your case for other reasons. We don't have standing, or, there's any number of reasons. But there's a number of instances where the Trump team made an attempt to submit what they believed was evidence of inconsistencies or illegalities when it came to the election. I'm not saying they were right or wrong. I'm saying they attempted to submit that to the court, and the court said, we're not going to allow you to submit that. They cut them off at the pass. So the Trump team can say, hey, man, look, yes, we believed it. Yeah, but everything was thrown out of court, but the court never heard our evidence. The court wouldn't allow us in court to make the argument that we were making. Now, I'm not saying the court should or shouldn't. I didn't read these cases. The courts may have been completely justified legally in saying you don't have the grounds to file this, so we don't have to listen to the evidence. This is not to say the court should or shouldn't. It's to say that if you're arguing that Donald Trump didn't believe that he was robbed, and that because of his cases, all of his cases were thrown out of court, that's evidence that he should have accepted that he wasn't robbed. Then the counter argument is he never got to submit the evidence, and he may be looking at evidence that was never submitted to court, saying that evidence right there, if it could ever get into court, that would substantiate what I believe. Now, the issue is now, if I'm involved in that case, if they ask, which nobody's going to, if they ask Garland Nixon, I'd say I'm going to go in, and because that is a material facet of this case, I'm going to go into this court in Georgia, and I'm going to start by arguing there is in fact evidence, if they got any. I don't know what they do, but if I got one little bit of evidence that something was wrong, right? One piece, just one really good, solid, strong piece of evidence, and it's screwed up as our election system is. You're going to have something. Right? Something, one thing. It ain't take much. In our election system, you're always going to be able to find something, right? Somebody didn't allow election observers, something that could be quite inconsequential, but it's not aligned with the law, right? A lot of these things are inconsequential, but you've got these laws and people don't always go by it. Okay. Now, I go before the court jury and I say, wait a minute. President Trump believed that he was robbed, that there were illegalities. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, if I can present to you one piece of evidence that there was an illegality going on, you have to let Donald Trump go. How can you convict Donald Trump if I can submit to you evidence that is convincing evidence that one illegality happened? If there was one illegality, then Donald Trump had the grounds to ask for judicial review, and he had the grounds to believe that he was robbed because there was at least one illegality. If I'm doing it and then I shuffle through that, and I damn guarantee you there's never been an election in the history of this United States that you couldn't find one illegality. And when I find that, and I say to the jury, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Joe Smithers on election day, look at this, he voted here and he voted here. Or look at this, on this particular location at this particular time, they did not have the election observers required by law, and so therefore by law they didn't send these things out on time, they weren't stamped, they didn't have enough signatures, those kind of like really minor things that you can find. I'd find one of them or two or three of them, little ones. Hey, the law says that these must be stamped within 4 hours of the election. And look at this. They weren't stamped till 12 hours after the election. You see what I mean? They have to be signed by the Secretary of State by such and such. They weren't signed. On and on and on. These can't account ballots that come from this county after this date because they were provisional ballots, blah, blah, blah. Look at this. They counted these provisions. I'm going to find something that says that is a violation of the law. And then I'm going to say, ladies and gentlemen, you got to let Donald Trump go. You got to let him go. We have now established that there was at least one violation of the law, no matter how minor. I'm not going to say this. I'm going to say it's big. We have established that there's one violation of the law. How can you have an election where we have established that there was a violation of the law that was detrimental to my client, but my client didn't have a right to say I've been robbed? We've decided, you now know that there was an illegality. Based on that, I would argue now, Donald Trump had a right to judicial review. He had a right to say he wanted the judicial review. He had a right to ask for judicial review. And he had a right to say, I think there's a problem with this election. And that's what he did. And I think if you do that, I think Donald Trump walks. And I think he should, because I think that's the foundation of What's going on here? That Donald Trump, think about this. What happens if Garland Nixon runs for dog catcher, registrar of wills, right? I'd run for registrar of wills. And afterwards, I find out something's crooked. And I say, man, something's rotten in Denmark. I think I was robbed. I think I should be registrar of wills. Somebody went around and they did this. They closed these polling stations. They did this. This where I would have got over blah, 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 blah. You know what they set it up now? If Garland ain't a member of the establishment, they're going to lock his ass up. Oh, really, Garland? So you think you were robbed? Yeah. Looks like we got another Trump case here. Guess we're going to have to lock you up. They set it up a precedent where from now on, when people make an argument that they were robbed, if you're part of the establishment, you're fine. If you're not, they've set the precedent where they can take you out. Let me see. Let's see what Raphael says. Raphael says he never pays any taxes, always trying to beat the system. The man doesn't have any fear of the laws and the justice system. This is why I hate. Let me say this. You don't pay any taxes. How many taxes did Amazon pay last year? Boing. How about General Electric? Boing. John, let me ask you this. You're mad. I say hate the player, hate the game. Are you? I'm not mad at Amazon because they didn't pay any taxes. I ain't mad at General Electric because they didn't pay any taxes, and I ain't mad at Trump because they didn't pay any taxes because they didn't write the damn laws. Who wrote the laws? Joe Biden and his crew, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer. You see, the people who wrote the laws, pushed the laws, and created an environment where rich people don't have to pay taxes. The neoliberals, and I mean the Republicans and Democrats alike. They don't pay taxes. They set up a neoliberal system where people don't pay taxes. And I'm supposed to be mad at the people that don't pay taxes? Let me ask you this. Weed's legal in Maryland. Let's say you're an anti-weed person. You're going to get mad at the people that smoke weed. It's legal. Perfectly legal. Guy goes in, he buys himself a joint, goes home, he smokes his joint. Everything he done is legal. If you are an anti-weed person, what are you going to say? Arrest this guy. He's smoking weed. This is terrible. Look at this low-life scum weed smoking guy. The law says he can buy weed and smoke it. Get off his back. If you don't like it, go after the government and say, make weed illegal again. Ain't going to work. Good luck with that. But you can do it. So I say Donald Trump never pays any taxes. The system, rich people don't pay taxes. Always trying to beat the system. Oh, yeah. Unlike everybody else. No, he's not trying to beat the system. That is the system. That's what you don't understand, Raphael. He's not trying to beat the system. That is the system. If I'm playing basketball, let's say soccer, I'm playing soccer, and they change the rules and they say you can now use your hands. And I pick up the ball and run down the field with it and throw it into the net. Hey, we got a goal. Are you gonna get mad at me? Hey, he's playing with his hands. They changed the rules and they said you can play with your hands. That's the game. I'm playing with my hands. I'm running around I pick up the soccer ball and run for my life and dive into the goal with the soccer ball in my hand. Why? Because they changed the rules. Get mad at the players if you don't hate the player, hate the game. The system is a system that rich people like Donald Trump don't pay. What is Trump supposed to do? Hey, man, the system says I don't pay any taxes. My accountant is adding everything up and I don't owe a dime. What are you going to do, Donald Trump? Give him an extra 100,000. Nobody's going to do that. Are you? I'm not going to. So that's my point. The man doesn't have any fear of the laws and the justice system. I do. I have tremendous fear of the laws and the justice system because they'll come after me unjustly like they did Trump. So that's my position. This is why I don't hate Trump. I hate the system. See, that's the difference between me. I don't hate the people. I don't hate the player. I hate the game. If the system was there, guess what? What you going to do? When I fill my taxes out at the end of the year, if it says you owe zero, what you think? I'm going to add an extra $100 to it? Not going to happen, Raphael. Not going to happen. I'm not giving them an extra $100. I'm keeping every dime. If it says you get back 10,000, I'm taking the 10,000. I know that ain't going to happen for me because I'm just an average schmuck. It's going to happen for people like Trump, but that's the game. So this is why I hate Trump. You hate Trump because he takes advantage of a system that Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell and Mitt Romney and the rest of these and Barack Obama, they created a system and we're going to get mad at Trump because he plays by the rules of that system. I don't. Trump didn't come into our political environment. He came out of our political environment. All right, let's keep going. But thanks a lot, Raphael. Great comment, and it really gave me something to talk about. We're gonna go. Let's go. Let's look. I got to go in a second here. Please tell us, why do you think after losing the headquarters, after losing the general, what is the logic behind Putin not saying anything? Tell us, please. It's long term. It's long term. Look, this is a war. Look, we're getting in. We get in a fight, and somebody gets in a good punch, and I got a black eye. You think I'm just going to walk away from that fight? That don't mean I lost that fight. In fact, when you are trained in self-defense, you understand you might take a hit, you might take a cut, you might take a bite. The difference between a person who's trained in self-defense and a person who's not is most people, you give them a little pain, they run. Bam, you give them a good strike. They don't want to fight no more. They want to run. A person who's trained in self-defense is going to stay there and fight till he's only got one, till he can't fight no more. He's going to stay there. Well, he wants to escape. He wants to flee. He doesn't want to fight. But if you back him into a corner, just because you give him some pain ain't going to stop him from fighting. So my point is this. Putin's playing the long gun. Okay, they lost their headquarters. It got hit by a missile and a general was killed. If that is in fact what happened, okay, fine. That's part of war, man. That's war. War, I put it like this. He didn't lose 71,000 people in like 6 weeks. If you got a choice, you can either you can get hit by a missile every now and lose a high-ranking guy, or you can lose 71,000 people in 6 weeks. I think the team that lost 71,000 in 6 weeks are the ones that lost. So they're going to continue to fight. They're going to lose. It's a war. You're going to lose generals. You're going to take hits. You're going to take punches. In a fight, you got to be willing to take punches. You ain't going to just deliver and not take any. But if you're delivering all the massive blows and the other one gets a punch in every now and then, I ain't losing no sleep. I'm going to keep fighting the way I'm fighting because I'm winning. Raphael says, this is a done deal for DJT. They will jail him. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Yeah, because I'll put it like this. It's not like he's going to get a fair trial. The ACLU used to have principles. They defended the principle, not the person. That's why they defended Nazis in Skokie. No, it's not. It's not principled anymore. It's just an arm of the Democratic Party. It's just an arm of neoliberalism. Raphael says, this is so funny. These are Biden's people. They really are. They are completely aligned with his foreign policy. Red Chili Pepper Super Stick. Thanks a lot, Raphael. Raphael's great. He watches, listens all the time, and he makes a lot of brilliant points. We don't always agree, but that's okay. Raphael says he never pays me. We already did that one. Let us continue. Raphael, man, Raphael's dropped the mic, son. Best answer. Thanks a lot, Raphael. I don't know what that was about. Probably somebody. There's a lot of good conversations going on. Garland Nixon is dropping facts like a wide receiver with butterfingers. That being said, let me check Rockfin. That's the perfect thing here to end it. Because let me go over to Rockfin. Denver attorney, a new world order is being born right in front of our eyes, while the rejection of the principle of equality, along with its total inability to negotiate, has long been a calling card of the President Vladimir Putin pointed out. The West is truly an empire of lies, right? And ghoulish is that U.S. media celebrates Russian deaths as if a reason to celebrate. Yeah, these people are out of their freaking minds. Gene says ACLU is one of many institutions, public and private, that have been co-opted by the shadow. Let me tell you before I leave about when I left the ACLU, a lot of people don't know that. I'll tell people to guess. The year I left the ACLU is huge. I mean, people are like, oh, the National Rifle Association, that is a dwarfs in the ACLU dwarfs the NRA and most other organizations. So I know because I was on the board of directors, the national board of directors for the ACLU. So I was one of the people that reviewed the financial statements, everything, how much we had, how much, we had in the bank saved, blah, blah, blah. And I asked people, ACLU, how much money you think they take in a year? And people are like, 9 million. Oh no, 30 million. Let me tell you something. The last year that I was on the national board of directors for the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, took in $300 million. When we went over our, money we had, I'll call savings, investments, reserves, all that kind of stuff, right? So over $900 million. The ACLU probably now is worth $1 billion, but if not, when I left, it was close to it. That was 2 years ago. and bringing in, I don't know, can't say what they're bringing in this year. They were bringing 300 million, right? So the ACLU is not broke, to say the least. I do believe that, I really honestly believe that it's a neoliberal organization, and that a big problem with the ACLU is, like so many other groups, they're getting money from the wrong people, and they can't go after the wrong people anymore because they're getting money from the wrong people, and lots of it. And I think the organization has become nothing but a political tool for the ruling elite, that if there's a trans bathroom bill or something like that, they're all over it. But if a political adversary of the Democratic Party is charged in a way that is constitutionally suspect, the ACLU ain't going to touch it. They ain't going to touch it. Not anymore. Those days are gone. So that's what I think of the ACLU. All right. Thanks a lot, Raphael. Man, appreciate Raphael Lagonde. I know I'm Lagonde. I know I'm always mispronouncing his name. How much does Soros give the ACLU? Let me tell you something. Soros is, if he does, he gives them some. It's, trust me, they got money coming from all over, 300 million. Trust me when I tell you that Soros ain't the only place they're getting money. They're getting money from all kind of Wall Street creeps. They're getting money, lots of money coming from Silicon Valley, tons of money coming from Silicon Valley, which of course protects Silicon Valley. The ACLU, think about this. Remember Twitter files and all of that? The ACLU should have been all over the Twitter files. The ACLU should be all over this latest allegation that the Biden administration is sending letters to the media saying, you've got to say what we want you to say. That's ACLU turf. ACLU should be all over that. They ain't touching it, are they? Ain't touching it, are they? They ain't going to touch the Biden administration. They're not going to touch Silicon Valley. They got lots of funds going from Silicon Valley, and they are aligned with these people. They are a neoliberal tool of the elite ruling class machine and nothing more. And they will go after trans bathroom bills or something like that, maybe a little bit of abortion stuff, things like that. But when it comes to the days when the ACLU would say, we don't agree with this person politically, but there is a legal and constitutional principle that we have to stand for, those days are shot to hell, my friend. Gone, finished, and out the door I went. Out the door I went. I was done with the ACLU. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a wonderful day. I think I might go watch some football. Peace. I'm out. Oh, by the way, I almost forgot. Last but not least, don't forget. Last thing I got to say is, do not forget, please. What you need to do is go to Garland. rockfin.com/Garland Nixon, in case they toss me off YouTube, which is a possibility. Patreon.com. Buy Me a Coffee is always great. Buymeacoffee.com. You can go there and you can say $5 or however many coffees you want. Buy Garland a coffee. And you can now do like Patreon. And you can say, I want to make it a monthly thing and I want to be a subscription, blah, blah, blah. Buy Garland a monthly coffee for 5 beans or whatever you want, right? So go there. Anything you can do to help the channel. We got PayPal. We got Cash App. All my info is there. I guess I ought to take the Twitter stuff off because I'm throwing off Twitter for now. But anything you can do to help the channel, certainly appreciate it. Peace. I'm out. And since I'm not on Twitter, please, everybody, spread this around. Share this share this video on Twitter. Thanks a lot. I'm out.